Hi, everybody. We are super excited to be here today and to have our esteemed panelists to talk a little bit about their journey and how they really got ready for this dissertation phase and that dissertation talk. You think, like, at the end of it all, you're like super excited. So the talk is kind of the last thing on your mind. You just want to graduate. So, so excited to have our freshly minted PhDs. So awesome. Dr. Desmond Kemp. Desmond, throw your hand up. Dr. Daynique Chingeli. Dr. Day, throw your hand up. Awesome. Dr. Vic Meadows. Yes, yes. Esteemed panelists, we're going to talk to you all today about how to prepare for that dissertation talk. So before we get started, I like to chat and I like to find out where people are coming from. So if you wouldn't mind, just drop into the chat what department you are in and where you're coming from to join us today. I'll get the party started. I see you guys. Community engagement, School of Medicine, Urban Ed, Dental School, Library Science, Social Works here, Pediatrics, yes. Music and Arts, Technology, awesome, very cool. I see you, Forensics, yes. Awesome. Great deal, everybody. Urban Ed, I see you. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our panelists. We gave them a couple of questions beforehand, but I know that you all also have some questions and likely have questions about how this process works. So what I'd like to start with is just asking our panelists, when you got to the end, well, first of all, how did you know that you were getting ready to graduate? How'd you know? And then when you got there, how did you start the preparation process of, okay, this is really happening. I'm going to do this. All right. Does anyone want to start?
I can go ahead and start first. So I guess on a practical sense, how I knew I was ready to be done was from what I had already proposed in my thesis proposal, when it was completed, when I was just sort of just presenting the data from those various aims, that was when I knew that I had done what I set out to accomplish during for my thesis or my dissertation. What was the follow-up question?
What was your process to kind of start the ball rolling to completion?
Okay. Um, it started with kind of packaging up all of my data into various stories as a publications, like being able to say, okay, if this were to be published, like how would it look? How could I use my background information, the current data, future directions, etc. And then I had a conversation with my mentor at the time, and we just talked about like what was next. I remember I was putting together this poster for a conference, and that was like the bulk of like my aim three. And I was like, yeah, here's the story. Like, I did everything. Like, let's start talking about writing and graduating. So I was just really upfront with it because I had to take a step back. And I also had a lot of people surrounding me, like in my lab, associate research professors, other mentors who looked at what I had started from and saw the growth and then was like, yeah, you're there. So that was my story.
I'll go next. I had a similar kind of trajectory as Dr. Zingeli. I had completed all the experiments that I had proposed and then some, because we had some side projects that were kind of related to my main aims. And I was able to include that in my dissertation and my defense presentation. And I started the process by like downloading the dissertation template and like trying to fill in the outline. And I had to use a resource. I was in the biochemistry and molecular biology department under the IBMG umbrella, and I used the resources within that department to help me make a structure that would be easily like changeable or amended as I was writing. Because if you just write in a document and you don't format the outline, you can't jump different sections as quickly in the navigation bar. And that was something that I mean, when you're deep in the writing process, it's really difficult to like keep scrolling up and down and find all the sections that you're trying to get to make sure you have your data right. So using the resources that you have in your departments or in your schools or even the writing center, I think would be a good way to start if you're at the writing stage.
I would jump in now and say, for me, it was two things that when I knew that I was done for real. And the first thing was when I was in coursework, one of the instructors said to us, that actually it was Dr. Ray Habersky, he said that you will know when you are done. And I just so happened ended up with an assignment that resonated with me a different way. And I was frustrated that I had to do it because I felt like it was a repetitive assignment. And by then, that's when I knew, okay, no more classes. And that same feeling came up again whenever after I prepared for comps, or actually it was while I was preparing for comps, I knew that at some point this had to be over. And one of the things that was very pivotal for me, I had a great advisory team who was willing to discuss things with me on a regular basis. I met with my whole committee constantly throughout the whole process. And one of the things that my advisor told me at the time was to stop reading, because I was reading too much and second guessing how I felt about the things that I already discovered and the things and the methodologies that I was already testing. So it was really important for me to stop reading in that process and then just write. And that's when I knew that it was time, because by that time I was able to answer the questions without even reading the text again.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much. So with our next question, and y'all in the audience Zoom of fear, be thinking of questions that you have. Thank you. Okay. So with our next question, what process did you use to create your defense talk? And then what was the biggest challenge you faced in preparing?
So this is a question that I actually just got asked recently. And the process that I used really was something that is important to say. A lot of times I rehearsed a lot. I rehearsed for 3 weeks, and I used the speak. What's the center called? I forgot, where they teach you, or they work with you on the speeches in liberal arts. I can't remember, but
Speech lab?
Yeah, the speech lab. I went to the speech lab twice. And then I had a few times where I had the chance to sit with like some of the professors, and they would give me ideas and different things on what to utilize in my defense. But also another thing that was great to do was to create a PowerPoint without even reading the dissertation. And so thinking about it from your audience perspective, what exactly would you want to hear about your research that you'll and think about the people that may be attending. My defense ended up being public. It was very public. I had 82 people in attendance. So that question for me was, how would I entertain the oldest person and the youngest person and give them this information and have them not walk away with a whole bunch of questions after I defend. So that was very important to think of. And so I think the best thing to instruct any student that's getting ready to defend is the rehearsal part, rehearsing your information and reviewing and reading and breaking it down so that you will be able to break it down to the, to the people that are not in the academic world and then to the ones that are in academia.
I'll echo what Dr. Kemp said. It's really important to practice, but maybe not so much that you sound robotic, but you want to know your material well enough that if you maybe skip a really important factoid you wanted to share earlier, you can wrap yourself around it later, like maybe mention it a little bit later, even though you had rehearsed it earlier when you were practicing at home. I was in biochem, as I mentioned earlier, so my presentation was structured very like background, rationale, hypothesis, aim, results, discussion, which is very structured. But within each aim, I would have a mini background and a mini reminder of why am I looking at something? Because what was important to me for conveying my message to my audience was I spent all these years looking at like a specific mouse model for a disease. Why? Why is that important? To me, it's important because I'm deep in the research. I spent all the time doing it, but I want them to feel like it's important. So that was one of the main messages I was trying to work on when I was presenting my defense talk.
And as for me, the method to my talk was similar to Dr. Meadows. It was providing a background of my overall big picture. It's kind of like the upside down pyramid. So like the very big picture, funneling into the one gene that I decided to study, and then the methods and the approaches, and then each of my like sections of my talk kind of was centered around the specific experiments that were done. And it was all scientific because my PhD is in biochemistry. But how I created and got to that point, I started off with like kind of laying out my figures from my dissertation and putting them all out and saying, okay, how can I use these figures and this data to build my story, to build like what Dr. Kemp was saying, what people want to know and can be able to comprehend, even if they're in my field or not in my field. One of the greatest challenges that I faced, I think, was making sure that it was understandable like to everybody, because I had to go from talking about cachexia to making sure people even understood what that word was and what that means. And so I started off with just aligning on my figures, identifying what story I wanted to tell. And then once I created my story, I wrote a script on how I would be able to explain that to somebody enthusiastically, and also so that they would be able to understand like what I was saying. So I broke mine up into like various sections. So the background, and then I had, here's my aims. And then in this aim, in an attempt to identify a molecule that would be relevant, for this X, Y, and Z, then this is what we did first. And then these are the results that I found. From that, I built on and understood that I needed to look at X, Y, and Z thing. And then I was like, okay, this is the approach, results. And then I moved on to the last portion of my talk, which had the same format, until I got to the conclusion of trying to make sure that everybody understood, like, here's my model, like, this is what it means, and this is what I want you to take away from it. So that was my process.
I need to add one more thing that I did, and I think it was very helpful. I attended 3 different defenses beforehand, and I listened to the questions that the committees asked the students or the candidates in that time. And one of the defenses that I attended, the question that lingered out to me the most was, where would you want to see your work go? And that was a big question because I just had not thought about that at the time. And that gave me more ways to approach my presentation whenever I decided to defend, or whenever it was not decided, when I decided to defend, but whenever it was time for me to defend.
I also watched defenses online. There's a ton recorded online. So if you're not able to attend live ones like Dr. Kemp, those are really nice because they'll record the presentation and sometimes the closed session. So that is like really great advice. I would definitely.
And I also did like a quick search on the internet to just see if other people may have had like a template of their own previous dissertation defense presentations. And I was like, okay, I can incorporate this and I can kind of like structurally figure out how to give this talk. Because if you think about it, you probably, if you've presented at other conferences, journal clubs, within your seminars and your departmental seminars, you have slides. It's okay to reuse those slides and it's okay to like use those to build up your talk. And once I had to hone in and say like, oh, I actually have a rationale slide already, and I have a hypothesis slide and a conclusions, like all of these things, like I just said, okay, this is the easy part. I have to just put it together to tell my story. It's not, I don't have a story. It's, I just need to structure it so people understand it.
That's great advice. I'll tell you too, 9 times out of 10, y'all, your committee is not going to tell you to go ahead and prepare for your defense unless you are ready for your defense. Okay. Nobody wants to see you up there failing. They all want you to be successful, especially once you come to this point in your time here. We all want to see you do well. So we're not gonna let you go up there and look crazy. Okay. We got you. All right. So I'm going to pause. Are there people or questions from our audience members that you want to drop in the chat or unmute yourself to ask?
I can go ahead. I had a question regarding, I know Dr. Day and Dr. Wick mentioned about like, how do you know when you're done? Is mainly, at least at the School of Medicine, is more based on the aims that you have proposed and how far along you have accomplished this. Now, what happens if that project dies for some reason? Say if your creek got silenced, and you have to sack the entire line and you have to start from fresh. You already like in your 4th year or 5th year. Then what happens under those circumstances? Like, how do you make sure that you are within your timeline, you are able to provide or convince your committee that you have had the training, even though you may not be able to publish or you may not have the project still alive, but you still have had enough training to graduate?
So I do think that your major chair, your primary mentor, your PI, will have to be your biggest advocate. Obviously, advocate for yourself. If you feel like you're done, present that to your committee. But your dissertation doesn't have to be discovering a new molecule or like curing cancer. You can have an entire dissertation of negative data because you still worked towards a goal. Maybe your hypothesis was wrong. That happens. Welcome to science. Like this happens all the time. So I think that one of the biggest misconceptions I had when I was getting ready to defend was that I didn't like discover something so new that I was contributing to like cure all of the liver diseases, but I was working towards something. I built a good skill set and I did find new, novel, whatever other word, data. It just wasn't what I thought it was. Or in your case, or not, I don't know if this is your case, but if you have a mouse line that just didn't pan out, you still present all of the PCRs you've done, all the Western blots you've done, all the stains you've done, and you say, oh, as it turns out, it was wrong. That's okay. And you can like present that. I don't think that will stop you from graduating, but you do need an advocate outside of yourself because committees can be, it's like a voting system.
Yeah, and I'd also add that's why it's important for our aims to be similar but unique. Like they're not necessarily dependent on each other. So you can make your entire dissertation defense on like one specific avenue that you research. Like it doesn't have to be the broad spectrum. It's the story of how to show that you're an expert. The other thing I want to add is like my entire, I think second, like middle portion of my talk was negative data. My hypothesis was disproven, but I spun it in a way to say, this is what we thought would have happened. Here's what we found. But because I've looked a little bit further in this model, I found an even stronger, argument. And I'm going to present this further data to you now and prove like, okay, troubleshooting, critical thinking skills, like all of these things that you're supposed to acquire as you gain your PhD. So yeah, it doesn't have to be this perfect, I found a new molecule and it works amazing. Like it's about being able to just address the key hypothesis, the core of your study. So you don't have to show them every negative thing. And sometimes whenever we're trying to build on maybe one experimental angle, we have a ton of other data that we're sitting on that can be expanded, and we just kind of like going down a different path because we said that we wanted to do this. But you probably have a ton of data that you can make a 45-minute talk on. So I would say don't stress too much on the aspect of worrying about what you'd present on, but definitely find your major advisor to advocate for you to make sure that you're still on track.
I will
Great,
add,
thank you.
can I add to this? Because honestly, in social sciences and in social work, some of the same elements that the sciences utilize, they come in handy for us as well. And you may have a lot of data. You may have a lot of, as Danny said, you may have a lot of data, and sometimes you don't know exactly what to really put in, and or you may have an overuse. Like I actually have 2 data sets that I did not use for my dissertation that I can use later. So just remember, you can publish it later after you are done. And the best way to really think of it is a good dissertation is a done dissertation. That was one of the statements that I heard from the time that I entered in until the time that I finished.
That's real. Get it done. Okay. So there are a couple of questions that came in through the chat. Harry, I think yours got answered. Yes. You good? Okay. One question is, how do you deal with a micromanaging PI when it comes to presentation style for your defense?
So that's a tough one. Obviously, you have a relationship with your PI, and you've navigated it and communicated with them somehow these past few years, hopefully in a healthy way, but that's not always the case. I'm going to say advocate again, and I hope that it's not like eye roll inducing, but you have to advocate for what you want. This is your work, your story. Yes, you did it in their lab or under their mentorship, but this is yours. Your name is going to be the first one published, the only name published in the dissertation. So I think if you have a specific manner you want to present it, do a trial run with your PI and just advocate for what you want. If they don't want you to speak a certain way because it's to them wrong, maybe have your committee there for the trial run and have them advocate for you as well. Like your committee is there to help support you, not just like support your PI.
And I would also add setting boundaries in a time frame. So if maybe your PI is someone that comes in at the last minute and hits you with all the corrections and all the changes, and it's the day before or the day of, no, it cannot work effectively for you to be calm and to be poised and all of these things. So you have to, again, practice, maybe set some time if you have a lab environment or a research group, set some time for the upcoming weeks before your talk, maybe at the top of the month. Say, I would like to present in lab meeting, or I would like to present in front of X, Y, and Z people. Please come to the conference room and watch me give my talk. Then that way that'll give them the opportunity to give their feedback. And I have some thoughts to add in the morning of, and I was like, okay, we will download your version and we will download my version, but my version stays the same. And you just have to be able to like make sure that your inner like confidence and your inner whatever it is that it takes you to get to the point of public speaking and presenting, that it's like completely like centered and ready to go, because you don't want anything like distracting your mind. You don't want the inner self-critic or the outer critics to like distract you from being like very effective on the day of. So have a time frame, top of the month, maybe few weeks in, have several people like around you hear the talk, talk to yourself in the mirror, like, just so that maybe if you find things that you need to tweak, then you can tweak them beforehand, but don't try to put everything at the last minute or have other people come in and with the last minute comments, because 45-minute talk and then 15 plus minute questions, who knows, and then you still have either your private defense before or after. That's a lot to handle in one day. So you need to make sure that there's some strict boundaries. And it comes from advocating and recognizing like nobody's going to mess with this day because this is my day to celebrate and show everybody like how amazing I am and I did all of this stuff. So
Love that. Desmond, did you have anything to add? Okay, good deal, good deal. There's another question in the chat. It says, the Department of Library and Information Science allows students to write and defend a master's thesis. How is the process of writing and defending a master's thesis different or similar to a doctoral thesis or dissertation?
So that might vary between departments. I would reach out to your program manager and ask if they have different restrictions for a master's thesis. But I think it generally, the writing part will be the same if you've conducted research or if you're doing a literature review. The writing structure will likely be similar. I do know that master's thesis defense can be private. Like the public presentation that is required, at least for the BMG program, is not required for most masters. So that's one thing that might be different.
I will say that there wasn't much difference in social science, but I will further the conversation to say that from what I've noticed from the master's thesis that I've read, and in comparison to dissertation, is the length, the page numbers. Sometimes some theses, some master theses are up to 75 pages, and then of course dissertation is way more. And then I've also seen some dissertations end at 99. So I will be honest to say it just, as Dr. Meadow said, it varies between your department and what the expectations are. And sometimes there are some master's theses that are continued into dissertations. And so that the important piece is always the further research and next steps or implications.
Any other thoughts? So having done a master's at a different institution and then coming to another institution to do the dissertation, I'll say for me, one difference was, the topic, right? And then the other difference was kind of the goal, right? So with the dissertation, with the master's, my goal was to kind of wrap that up, but it wasn't necessarily that I needed first author publications from it, right? With the dissertation, I wanted and needed to have those authorships, first author publications out of it. So I think that's one difference. If you look at my thesis versus my dissertation on the shelf, my thesis looks thicker, like I had more data there. And so I don't know that it was actually longer, but I had a lot of tissue and cell photos that were part of my my thesis that maybe were not a part of my dissertation. So that maybe the goal is a little bit different with the dissertation, because understanding that from that, you're going to go into your own independent, either postdoc lab or something where you're taking on your own project and doing what you want to do to further your career. So I have a couple more questions, I think. Oh, maybe not. Okay, good deal. Are there other questions though? Before I slide back into my set of questions. All right, keep thinking. Okay, so what about something you wish you had done differently? Is there anything that you wish you had done differently?
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. So I will come from the perspective of writing, and eventually one of the things that is just really important. I don't know how many of you all have had a conversation with other students who graduated, but the editing process for the graduate office is not to be played with. And it is very tedious. You have to be very intricate and pay attention to that template that they provide, because that, even if your margins are, a 0.2 of a inch, I mean, they make sure that 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 it's a 0.2 of an inch off. So editing was a hardship, and I defended in March. And so if I could do it all again, and also I would also state, so if you defend in March, and if you have to do revisions, my defense was one of the last weeks in March. So we literally had 4 weeks to turn around the edits and for me to graduate and be okay for that semester. And that was a headache. And I will tell you, get a jump started ahead on editing. So as soon as you submit your dissertation, go back and read it, edit as much as you can, and then also maybe, if you can, probe your committee to give you some feedback, some early feedback, so that way you can begin editing the research and then still defend, but just have that opportunity just to give yourself some leeway to save yourself from headaches in the future. But also another thing is, I would hire an editor earlier and bring the hired editor in much sooner than after the defense. And I think that would be the best way to just jumpstart on the editing process.
Coming from the writing perspective as well, I wish I had started writing earlier. Everyone always tells you, write as you go. You do a PCR experiment, go ahead and write the summary for it, or if you do a literature search, go ahead and write a summary of what you read. And you roll your eyes now, you're like, oh, that's a 4 years from now problem. No, it's not. Do it now. That's the advice. Like, I wrote my dissertation super fast because I had a deadline I wanted to meet, and that was very stressful. And that's one thing I wish I had done, started sooner.
So mine is from a different perspective, and it's about health. What I wish full transparency, in my private defense after my amazing defense talk, I nearly passed out. And it wasn't because I was nervous. It was because internally, I went from adrenaline to none. And I was clenching on to the podium as I'm answering a question from one of my committee members. And I'm like, hold on, I need to sit down and collect myself. So one of the things that I wish I was probably more diligent about during that time was not just sitting behind the computer for however long it took me to write up this dissertation, but being able to focus on my overall physical, emotional, mental health. Because all of those things really do take a toll on you, especially with such a huge task as graduating. So that would be probably the biggest thing I wish I would have gone back and been more in tune with drinking enough water and eating enough in the morning and all of those things. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to ask Charisma to drop the link for CAPS and for the health and wellness promotion in the chat. Please utilize those resources. We also have a new group out of psychology that is taking new clients. So definitely take advantage of those resources. Keep your self healthy, okay? Mental health and self-care is so important, especially as you go through this process. And I think a lot of folks, kind of are just looking at the end goal and trying to get to that end goal, and then neglect various parts of their finished. My doctor said I had a vitamin D deficiency. I mean, hey, I wasn't going outside. So lots of different things to kind of consider and think about. And also my hair. We had to cut my hair a lot right after my qualifying exams because I completely neglected it. Yeah, my split ends were popping out everywhere. So that part. Yes, and I love the chatter that's going on in the chat. Awesome. Thanks, y'all. The other thing I want to do is give a shout out to our University Writing Center, because Desmond mentioned editing. Now, the Writing Center is not going to look at your science, but they will look at your work and make sure that things make sense. So I would say definitely utilize the University Writing Center. Use that template. Everybody knows that there is a template that you should be going by. Go ahead and start writing in that template now. Don't wait till the last minute and decide you're gonna plop everything in there for Word. Okay, go ahead, start writing and utilizing the template now. Also, our recorders used to do a pre-check. I'm not entirely sure that they still do the pre-checks, but you can definitely check into that and email them and ask if they would be willing to do a pre-check on your thesis or dissertation. That could save you a lot of time and some health and well-being. I remember getting my dissertation pre-checked, and Desmond's right. They break out the ruler to make sure that you are 0.5 from that edge. Okay, it's serious. So so keep that in mind. Also, Charisma just dropped that Writing in Community is happening every Monday. So that's from the Writing Center, and it's happening in our grad common space. So right in the library on the 4th floor, you can go in Monday from 4 to 6 and just have that designated time to write. And it doesn't have to be your thesis or your dissertation. It could be a smaller project, but that designated time and the accountability is super important. Okay. All right. What did you learn about yourself during this process? What did you learn about you?
Okay, so I think I learned that I had to ease up a lot about how critical I was throughout probably the entire 5 years. Because as I was like putting everything together, like, and seeing it all in this, my document was like at least like 300 pages, y'all. It was big. And it was just like seeing everything put together and like being proud of myself and being like, I did that. Like all of this work, like I did it, you know, and I was just like reflecting a lot about how hard I was on myself when experiments didn't go exactly the way that I was hoping it would, or, something failed, but like, your failures always outshine like the successes at times. So like, I felt like there was always that lingering, like it's not good enough, or I'm not doing good enough to make it to this point. But then being able to sit down while I was writing and have this full document that like from start to finish, like I knew that I lived and breathed all of it. I was very, very proud of myself. And so I think that was probably what I learned the most, was just patting myself on the back a lot more, because we do hard things with this PhD or master's program. Like not everybody goes through these programs and does it successfully. So I wish I probably went back and was just like, yeah, girl, you got this, keep going, a little bit more, take a break, like, as opposed to like keep hustling, so that's what I learned.
So similar to Dr. Jagali. Oh, sorry, Dr. Kep, go ahead.
You go.
I also had no chill. So that was what I learned, that I needed to relax a little bit. I feel like there's a type of personality that goes into higher education. Hi, everyone. We're all type A. all highly driven and we want to succeed, but sometimes that can rear a really ugly head. So definitely take care of yourself. Echoing what we had discussed earlier, that was what I learned about myself.
So what is interesting about that, I am too anal. I think some of you probably saw me around campus carrying around a journal and a big bag. And that journal actually was my dissertation journal. I journaled everything from the day that I started writing. And I actually recently added something to it. So I'm very anal when it comes to making sure that that I was very prompt as well when it came down to making sure that I entered stuff and keeping record of what the outcomes or anything that changed in the research. I made sure that was noted. And eventually I ended up finding out that I had a passion for research and that I actually had some interest in working in the research world. And that's how I ended up with my postdoc that I currently have now. And so because of that, I just necessarily was, and again, I was planning on going back into the classroom. I'm a trained teacher. So I was like, I'll be teaching and working in school administration after I'm done, but eventually ended up deciding, no, research is it. And that's what I learned is I love asking questions and answering them.
That's great. Something Vic said kind of resonated with me. To be honest with y'all, I was probably in defense mode for about 3 weeks after my defense. Anybody that came with me with anything, I was ready to defend it and jump on it. So I was in a very heightened mode of defense, right? So very, yeah, well, it happens.
So honestly, for me, I'm still in defense mode, which is sad. I found myself being very combative in a discussion with one of my coworkers recently. So I will say that whole defense preparation and it kind of lingers on after you're done.
Yeah, it definitely does. Like my friends were like, you got to calm down, girl. So. All right. Are there questions from our audience? A question for
Barry had one. I saw it earlier, and
okay.
His question was: is it helpful to draft blueprints for the chapters until you are waiting on data and analysis? And the answer to your question, Harry, is right. That was the best advice somebody gave me. Is write as much as possible. And I actually utilize and I actually started writing before I had any data. And book reviews and literature reviews are very important to the dissertation because that helps you connect the gaps of what's in, the gaps in a study. So it's important that you are writing what you are reading and what you're processing from those things.
And I'll also add, like if you're a little bit more visual like myself, put it in a PowerPoint presentation so you can structure it like this is your background purpose, this is your experimental design. And so it's just like a few short sentences that can eventually stimulate like longer bouts of like paragraphs and text and things like that. I prefer to have that format because it's just sitting down thinking about the experiment that I did. But if I had like a PowerPoint to say, okay, well, this is how it flowed, it's easier for me to write it that way. So I think just kind of hone in on what your best writing style is. If you don't know, I'm not sure if there is a workshop for that, but hopefully there would be. And that would be a nice workshop. But yeah, so hone into what like works best for you. And then, but yes, lay it all out. Just have it somewhere that you can access because you don't want to wait till the last minute putting everything together.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of outlines, similar to Danique's approach or Dr. Jenkins.
Yeah, the library actually did have a writing style session. So before I defended, they had 3 sessions on different research writing styles. So sometimes it pops up because I didn't see it the year before I defended, but I definitely saw it in the time that around my defense. They had thematic research. They also had one that it was a science-based one. They were teaching like all the science PhDs how to use like one of the processes, one of the surveying techniques or something. But yes, the library hosts a lot of different writing sessions. And then to JC, your response to the journal, to my statement about the journal, I really wrote everything. Defense and dissertation. The defense is the last part of the journal, and yes, I dated. Like I said, I started writing my dissertation, and when I started, the first day that I wrote, I literally, even from what the file was saved as on my computer, if I put it on a zip drive, what zip drive it was on, what color the drive was, or if this, also what books I found in the library were listed in the journal, my main text. I did also do a little goal setting because I started writing almost 2 years before I actually defended. I actually put a defense goal date, and I didn't make that defense goal date, but I still had it within the same school year. And as well, another thing that, discoveries. Yes, discoveries was important because that was how I created the final chapter 5. Your own discoveries is in your discussion. Thoughts. The thoughts go along with your data set, your data analysis. So any of the thoughts that you have. So after your interviews, a PhD told me, a PhD in science, he told me to write after any interviews or anytime I collected data, write how I was feeling and my thoughts after those interviews. And that way you will be able to add it to your data analysis.
Awesome. Thank you. So there's I dropped a link to a LibGuide on research, but there is literally a LibGuide on just about anything, any topic. So definitely check those out. Our librarians do that work really for you guys. And there's a lot there that's specifically for grad students as well. There's a great question in the chat. How do you guys manage job hunting while writing the dissertation, and any advice or pointers for that?
Go with your funders first. Whoever is like funding the areas that you are researching, look and see what positions they have because they may have a fit for you. And one of the other things that I did I thought was interesting. I took my keywords from my dissertation and put it in the job search. So I put it in Indeed and I got a return on a lot of things. So I did, my study was on managing public sector employees that engage on social media. So I used social media policies, and I put it in the search and was looking for anybody that was featuring tech policies or social media policies as part of the job. So yeah, whatever your topic may be, throw it in the search. LinkedIn, IUPUI really pushes LinkedIn to graduates. And so that was another thing. LinkedIn was very helpful with connecting with other people in the area or of my research and people that are doing the work along the lines of what I was interested in for the job. And so that network is really helpful to have as well.
And I didn't ask y'all to really introduce yourself and tell us what job you're in now. Sorry, my bad. But could you also share that with folks as well?
Sure, I'll go ahead and I'll just finish. I am currently a ACLS fellow, and ACLS is a fellowship. It's a leading edge fellow. And so the fellowship is for 1 or 2 years for the fellows that they select. And these are for people that are in the humanities. And so they place us in a public sector or a nonprofit organization to do impactful work. And so I was placed in the Deep Center in Savannah, Georgia as a research and policy analyst.
I am an ARACTA postdoctoral fellow at Rutgers University. So IRACTA program is to help me continue my research career while also preparing me to teach. Because unlike Dr. Kemp, I realized I love teaching during my dissertation. So I had an opposite result. And that's something that my program that I was in, IBMG, did not help me in. So to be a better teacher, because I've had some bad ones, I wanted to find a program that would help me. So that's where I'm at right
now. And I'm currently a program management specialist here at IU School of Medicine. And how I navigated like the job hunting process. So I had already committed to being a short-term postdoc in my current lab after I graduated. So I didn't necessarily have a ton of job hunting, but the current position that I'm in right now, during my writing phase, I met with one of my bosses, and we just had a meeting, and we started talking about like it was a very short like lunch meeting, and we started talking about working together. And then I ended up like following up a few months later, and then I applied. And so it's not to say that during my writing process I didn't have a lot of things that was going on. I was like mentoring a master's student, still doing revisions on a current paper that was in progress, writing, and then there's other host of things that was happening. So time management while writing is really tricky process, but I knew that my priority was to finish, and so I put everything else kind of like at the back burner, and I told like my student, okay, we can only do 2 times out of the week, not the whole week, not full days. Like I just made it like very clear to the student, like, I know that I want you to be successful, but honestly, I also would like to graduate. So I had to just be very like clear about like that. And then I planned like my experiments for my revisions around like writing. So I knew that I needed like a 4-week time point and then like a 12-week time point. And so during that time, I didn't have to do anything with the animals. So I could just say I'm working from home, or and in any meeting that I had to join for lab, like if I didn't need to be in person, I just said I'm going to be joining from home. And that's like a flexibility that not everybody has. But if you were to look at your calendar and think about some of the meetings or other things that you have going on, if you can, omit something for a certain time frame without it like drastically changing the end result, then maybe consider, being a little bit more clear with them and saying like, I have this primary goal. I can work on this, or ask for help as well. I did that as well. So I asked a lot of people if they could help me do these other experiments or show up for me in this capacity, because sometimes the things that we think we have to do, like other people can do them too. It's just that we chose to be, responsible for some of those things. And so that's kind of how I ended up managing that tricky process. It's hard. It's just hard. Yeah, but best of luck, honestly.
Can I ask a question to the group? Dr. Hardy? Okay.
Go for it.
Yeah. What are some frustrations that you currently have about the process?
Well,
I see Ashika over there sweating.
Oh, to everyone else. I thought you meant the panelists. Because I was going to say
I was
one
asking,
that I have.
I was really asking the group.
Oh, okay. But there is one that I have. If you could change it, that'd be great, Dr. Hardy. But we can talk about that afterward.
Charisma, why you say that's a loaded question?
Though I'm not in the PhD, I'm just like, you're ready to start a pod. You really have some things said that maybe Dr. Hardy shouldn't be here for, but she can be here for.
I see time management in the chat as a frustration. Anybody want to address that? And also, Chris will put this in the chat, but maybe we put it in there again. Dr. Erin Carroll is going to come and talk with us. What's the date on that? February 21st, maybe?
21st.
Yeah, February 21st. And he'll talk about work-life balance, or at least the attempt to have work-life balance, right? So sign up for that. That one may be one that you can get some good answers to and some great tips to how to navigate all the parts of your life and not let all the balls drop.
And
I think give yourselves grace. Like, you
Yes.
may drop a ball, and that's
Yeah.
okay. You can also pick it up, just deep breaths all the time.
Right. It's okay to rest. I had to learn that. It was important to go to sleep when your body says go to sleep, go to sleep. And it will be there the next day. And deadlines, and it's okay to, I always tell PhD students and even graduate students in general, advocate for yourself. That is the most important piece is, if you cannot meet a certain deadline, ask for that extra day, because life happens. And I think right now, in the era of post or current pandemic / post-COVID time, these schools are a little bit more flexible now with these deadlines. And yes, you do want to graduate on time, but if you're not asking for no more than 7 days, I think it will be permitted from the faculty.
Yeah, I remember when I wanted to send my draft to my committee members, because not every committee or faculty member is going to want to read your dissertation multiple times. Mine did not. Mine wanted to read it like one time and give me my feedback, and that was it. So I had promised them, like, April 1st or whenever it was, I was going to send them my document, but I was not prepared to give it to them. But and that was because of all of the things that I just didn't have time to finalize the last part that I wanted to, change or adjust. And then I just emailed them and I said, I have a document, but it is not the final one that I want to give you all. Are you comfortable with me giving it to you maybe in like a week or two? Or I put a set time frame, and then that gave me an extension. And a lot of them were very flexible to say, yes, I'd rather read the one that you want us to read as opposed to like going back and forth over multiple drafts. So my PI and I, like my major advisor, she was the one that we were going through different drafts. But as far as my entire committee was concerned, they were very firm on wanting just like the full or the final. And so I had to be comfortable enough to even ask for the extension. And I think oftentimes we don't want to ask for that help or ask for that grace. But that came from, saying, hey, I can't meet this and I don't want to give them something that's not the best or not the final. So I just went ahead and asked, and they were fine with it. And then that alleviated so much pressure because I think during that time I was going to a conference as well. And it was like, how am I going to keep up and be at the conference, but then also trying to, do all of this other stuff. So it's hard. And I keep saying it's hard, and it's because it is. But there are areas like you can do it, and there are areas in your schedule that hopefully kind of have some form of flexibility that you can adjust to get to this end goal.
So I know it's 5 o'clock and some folks are going to have to leave us, but I want to address a few of the things that are in the chat really quickly. Harry had a question or a thought about demotivation and how to deal with demotivation and variables that are not in their control. We also had a question about when and where to start. So if there are panelists that want to address that. And then I have a statement that sometimes the committee members don't get along, and then they can create challenges as well.
Yeah, I was actually answering the question about the demotivation. So anytime you have those variables that you cannot control, that is what your research limitations are. A lot of people think, oh, research limitations are, just solely the research. No, those variables is what you write in your limitation section. So you write down how you're feeling at that moment and then utilize that as your limitations. And where to start, how to start, when to begin. You start anywhere. Like my research literally started as a conversation with my students that I was having about social media issues. And then next thing I know, I realized that I had an interest in social media. And that's when I started building my research. So where to start is definitely the whenever you have a question and you think you have an answer to it, that's when you start writing.
I started with the results. Results are pretty easy because you already have the data and you already know what it says. So that's where I started. And then I kind of worked from my results to my background information. I think too many times people do try to be sequential and start with their background and the literature review. You probably already did that when you did your qualifying exams. Leave that literature review off to the side and keep it there because you'll come back to it. But at some point, you'll want to tailor whatever you're working on to your project and to your results. And not everything that was in your lit review will go in there.
So for me, how I was able to kind of muster up some motivation was I stopped thinking about how to be motivated about my science, and I found something in life that made me feel like I can get through that highs and lows. And for me, that was running. So whenever I would run, I started visualizing like that end goal as me graduating. And so I took a step back from being muddled in the data, being muddled in the science, and tried to apply being like, passionate or motivated about other things in my life, other things that made me happy, being surrounded by friends, being, having a hobby or whatever it is that makes you, mindfully feel good, like as opposed to just like continuously looking at this data. Because even now, I had a meeting with like my old lab and we were talking about this manuscript, and it was the same feelings like, yeah, I am glad I do not do this anymore. Like it did not spark like this feeling of like, okay, fulfillment or anything like that. And so it's just, this is a process that we have to go through. And, the project that we pick at the beginning, unfortunately, we're stuck with it at the end, especially if it doesn't pan out. But that's why it's so important to not just only do the one thing, is to really have like other things in your life that you can say, okay, I can look at this. Like for me, it was like running. I can look at starting my run, easy going, pushing through, making sure that I can make it through. And I applied those similar concepts to whenever I would need to like sit down and actually just like put the data together. Because if I can do it through running, I know I can do it through this. And that was just kind of what helped me. Yeah, I'm all about the self-care, y'all. So I will be on a whole soapbox on that.
I will also throw into another motivating factor for me whenever I became demotivated was looking for a job. And so, so I actually started doing my job search whenever I was like, I am not interested in writing right now. So I would just start looking through different websites of companies that I was interested in working for and looking at the different initiatives that they were working on, and started developing and catering my resume to those institutions.
I wrote it in the chat, but I think one of the things that is important to think about while you're in this writing stage or preparing for your defense is that you need to give yourself grace. Not every day is going to be the same. Some days you're going to have really great writing days. You're going to turn out a chapter maybe, or like get your whole methods written out. And then other days you'd rather vomit than like open your laptop. I don't know. So just recognize that there are going to be good days and bad days, and it's okay. Like dropping that one ball is still okay because you.
And also, that's like a point that you brought up. I think that we don't have to sit at the computer for 8 hours to write our thesis and dissertation. Like when you feel invigorated to do it, jot down that thought. Carry your journal around with you if that's something that you really liked about Dr. Kemp's journey. Like whenever you get those thoughts, just like that's the moment. And then slowly, once you have an outline, then you can sit down and say, okay, I'll carve out my 4 hours. I'll carve out this. But it doesn't have to be this long stretch of a writing process or even preparing your talk. Like if you just don't have it in you, you don't have it in you today. But tomorrow you might. So it's always good to just step away and say, okay, I'm going to start again.
I love this. Has been great. If my panelists would, if they don't mind, drop their information in the chat. There may be folks that want to reach out to you all. If you guys loved this and want more workshops and programming like this, I would encourage you to join our PFFP program. If you are a PFFP scholar, throw a heart in the reactions, please. Let us know that you are here. Charisma put in the chat the registration for the orientation if you just want to learn more about PFFP and all the cool things that we do and things that you can learn about. This is free professional development for you and for your classmates and for postdocs. So spread the word. And we're not at all greedy. Oh yeah, go for it. Take a screenshot. You got it.
One more nugget. Can I share one more nugget that I just found out your colleagues in California, you guys at the University of California institutions are creating syllabi. So they're creating curriculum of their research. So that's what you're going to be competing against. So FYI, okay? Create a syllabus and a curriculum of your research.
Also, though, I would go on Twitter if you're going to do that, because so many scientists on Twitter have posted their visual abstract syllabi for classes or their own research. That's all out public information. I just will read it and see if that's what you want to do too. Also, everybody smile if you have your camera on. I want to take a screenshot. Yeah.
Did you get it? You got it? I'm smiling.
I took a couple. I really hope I did, y'all.
I always just take mine with the phone. Great. Thank you so much. Just give our panelists a round of applause.
Yeah, I was unmuted, so you guys heard the pitter patter.
I like that they actually kind of move now, the little claps. Very cute. Thanks, everybody. Our next program is our PFFP orientation. It will be February 7th from 4 to 5 p.m. It'll help you learn more about PFFP and the programming that we do and how you can actually earn a digital badge for attending something like this. All right, peeps. Thank you so much. We will put the recording on the graduate office website under PFFP. If you haven't, not on the website, on our YouTube page. If you haven't checked out the grad office YouTube page, you are missing a wealth of resources. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day, y'all.